Jurgen Klopp is leaving Liverpool, and I'm not going to tell you how I really feel about it.
Bye, have a beautiful time.
But seriously, this leaves an opportunity, because I'm going to rebuild Liverpool after Klopp. And as a United fan, I can't believe I'm about to do this. But anyway, here is the challenge. First off, I want to slowly fade out the experienced players of Klopp's era, replacing them with my own signings to make this my Liverpool team, as well as continuing to introduce the younger members of the current Liverpool squad into more prominent roles, with the ultimate goal of winning the treble. And this video will only end once we accomplish exactly that. So, with Jurgen Klopp leaving at the end of the first season, it's time for me to take over for the challenge to begin as I start a new era for Liverpool FC. So to kick things off, I plug in a standard 4-3-3 formation and identify that centre midfield spot as an area I want to strengthen, so the hunt begins. There's also a bid for Mohamed Salah, and although I will eventually look to replace him, now is certainly not the right time. It certainly is the right time to say our farewells to Thiago though, as a bid from Saudi Arabia comes in. But I think I have identified the perfect replacement in that centre midfield spot, and he is world class. And that man is Aurelien Tchouameni from Real Madrid, and a bid of £70 million is accepted from our £80 million budget. Within a week, the deal can be completed and we welcome our first new signing under the new era of Omega Luke. And he slots in perfectly into our midfield, which right now also rotates Trent and McAllister in that deep line playmaker slot. After selling a couple of more squad players, I also brought in a possible long-term replacement for Van Dijk in Pavlovic from Salzburg for £25 million. Ironically, our first game of the season was hosting Manchester United, our biggest rivals, at Anfield, and we looked solid, winning the game 3-0 without allowing them a shot on target. And our defence continued a fantastic start to the season, allowing for 5 wins from 5 games. There was a couple of hiccups along the way of the first half of the season, however, but overall it was a solid start and we were within striking range of top of the league, and with 2 games left, ready to qualify for the Champions League knockouts. We also found ourselves as big favourites to win the League Cup at the semi-final stage, where we would face West Ham in the final and eventually go on to win and lift the first trophy we could at Wembley after a 4-1 win. We did, however, face a shock exit from the 4th round of the FA Cup to Sunderland, which of course means the treble is off the table in Season 1. The rest of the season, however, seemed like a showdown with Arsenal, as they are second in the title race, and we've drawn against them in the round of 16 of the Champions League, which they knocked us out after beating us 2-0 in the first leg at the Emirates Stadium. We started to pull away from them in the Premier League though, going into the final 8 games. They were eventually knocked out of the Champions League semi-finals by Inter Milan, but their end of season form in the league was strong and included beating us again at home. Thankfully though, we held on, clinching the Premier League title by 2 points. So a domestic double isn't bad for our opening season in the new era of this Liverpool side, but there are some concerns. Only 23 goals for our top scorer Darwin Núñez, and unfortunately we don't have that big of a budget of around about £70 million if we want to change it and bring somebody new in. Once again, I begin this season thinking about what players I want to define my era at the club, and that didn't include Cody Gakpo, unfortunately, so I sold him to Spurs, managing to get nearly £50 million for him. That also didn't include Ricardo Horta, which was the last signing under Klopp at Liverpool, and I received £36 million. Although Pavlovic is great, I simply couldn't pass up on signing Diamonde at Sporting, who is a monster of a player, currently unhappy at the club, and I can get him for £55 million. He can also play in the DM role quite well and gives us options to toy around with a 3 at the back formation. A whopping £16 million came in then for Andrew Robertson, which I immediately accepted and knew right away who I wanted to replace with. Alphonso Davies at Bayern Munich, who also has a £106 million release clause. Robertson is also a Klopp-era type of player, so it made sense to sell the 30-year-old. I did try a 3 at the back formation in the first game, and it didn't go well against newly promoted Swansea. Although the next match against Manchester United, it was a completely different story, as Liverpool won 6-2. Why don't you subscribe while I change my shirt? Although we continued our run of good form at the beginning of the season, November and December were far from title-winning form, and we found ourselves slipping down to 5th position. Manchester City also knocked us out of the League Cup, and Arsenal popped up again to knock us out of the FA Cup in the quarterfinals. Our Premier League form really picked up and we began climbing back up the table, mainly thanks to reverting back to the 4-3-3 we used last season. But it's the Champions League where we really shone, coming from 2-0 down against Manchester United to win 3-2 in the round of 16, on to knocking out Celtic in the quarterfinals 3-0 on aggregate. But guess who we play in the semis? Of course, it's Arsenal, but this time we spanked them 4-0 in the first leg, and prevented ourselves from even being beat in the second leg as we draw 2-2, meaning we progress into the final against PSG. We even pipped Arsenal to a third place finish in the league, while Salah finished on 25 goals. But it's the big one, it's the Champions League final time, a trophy that is synonymous with Liverpool Football Club, and a trophy that will be really stamping my legacy in this new era since Klopp has left. It's not for the treble, but it's still something this club is desperate to win this season. But an awful start, as maybe you can say a blunder from Alisson, as Mbappe's long-range effort skids up underneath him. Luckily, Salah dispatched a penalty he won shortly after, but it was Mbappe causing us trouble again as his pinpoint cross found the head of Zaire Emery. And unfortunately, this time round, it wasn't Liverpool's name being carved into that huge European trophy, as we had to watch PSG lift it instead, and season number 2 is a trophyless one. And so maybe we need a big change up for this side in season number 3, and we've got £72 million in the current budget for us to do just that. I immediately knew I needed a striker for next season, and Victor Osimhen was my guy, £83 million. I also sold Luis Diaz for £62 million, as the 29-year-old was kind of underwhelming for me last season, and I knew I had a good replacement. That man was Rafael Leao. Yes, he's only a couple of years younger than Diaz, but he is my signing and a player that could definitely define my era. Speaking of which, Mohamed Salah is a legend of the club, but in his last year of his contract, he wants to leave, and I accepted a £42 million offer for him. With the last of these Klopp player-defining eras being Virgil van Dijk at centre-back. Well, outside of Alisson, but keepers can go on until their late 30s, and I'm happy to keep him around. Well, anyway, Van Dijk was also unhappy. He couldn't move to Saudi Arabia and announced he is leaving for free at the end of his contract this season. To be honest, I was actually happy to let him go because I already found his replacement in Robert Renan for £60 million, a quality left-footed centre-back. Salah is a little bit more tricky to replace, and I feel like there's nobody on the planet who can do that right now. But there is somebody who could do that in a couple of years' time. And I've signed him. Because I've just spent £67 million on bringing in Lamine Yamal from Barcelona to Liverpool. The 19-year-old is far from the finished product, but he is the future of this football club. To pay for his transfer, I did have to sell both Diogo Jota and Fabio Carvalho, again 2 Klopp signings that made us £70 million. To pay for Renan though, I sold Joe Gomez to Real Madrid because he's 29 now, as well as Endo to be able to afford the transfer. To help out the rest of the first team for numbers, I promoted 3 players in Ben Doak, Connor Bradley and Calvin Ramsey into the first team permanently to fill out the squad depth and give them game time. And once Virgil van Dijk leaves, I feel that this is the end of the Klopp era signings. As well as bringing through and integrating the youth players I set out to do from the beginning by promoting those lads. And despite changing a lot of the players this year, some of the football we played was absolutely beautiful to watch as the new guys slotted right in. And we were just a McAllister penalty away from once again beating United at the start of the season. Something felt new and fresh about this team as they sat top of the league, doing well in Europe, and faced a Merseyside derby ahead of them in the League Cup semi-final, which we won comfortably across 2 legs 4-0 to face my era's main rivals, Arsenal, who beat us after extra time 1-0 in the cup final. With a few months left of the season though, the treble was still on and very much in our own hands. Although he wasn't putting up the same numbers as Salah, Yamal was certainly a fan favourite this season. Just when I thought we were unstoppable though is exactly when we were humbled, as Red Bull Salzburg smashed us in the quarters of the Champions League 4-1 on aggregate. And although Arsenal gave us a tonking in the penultimate league game of the season, we had run away with the league title, eventually finishing 13 points ahead of both City and Arsenal. We also find ourselves in the final of the FA Cup against City after breezing past Tottenham in the semi-finals. Again, it is not the treble we desire, but it's a trophy we have yet to win since taking control of the club. City have a fantastic side, however, and came out swinging at Wembley and took the lead through Bernardo Silva's strike. It wasn't until the second half when we woke up a bit and Trent found an equaliser off of Yamal's cross. And then it was a quick-fire brace from Darwin Núñez, who eventually actually won man of the match in this game, leading the line in Osimhen's absence because of an injury, and reminding everybody that he is still around. and the 4-1 win was capped off by a fantastic goal from our left back Alphonso Davies as we lift the FA Cup. So a domestic double was won, we were very close to a domestic treble, and of course I can't believe that Red Bull Salzburg prevented us from winning the ultimate treble and the ultimate goal of this challenge. But this team felt very good this season. We got 30 goals from new signing Victor Osimhen, and Tchouameni even chipped in with 20 goals, and both of them missed that cup final, and we still managed to win the FA Cup. Next season though, we got £77 million to spend, so it's going to be interesting to see who we bring in. I accepted bids for Van Dijk despite him having a month left on his contract, as well as signing a fullback in Coyote who can play on both sides. My scouts also found an absolute gem from Argentina. The 19-year-old attacking midfielder Mastan Tuono was at River Plate and available for less than £15 million. It may force me to change direction in terms of tactics, but I do see that as a potential era-defining signing. Tsimikas was another player to leave us for Saudi on a free transfer, but I also spent the remainder of the money on Lewis Miley from Newcastle. But with Van Dijk, Salah and other Klopp signings gone, I have switched to a 4-2-3-1, and my Liverpool side looks rather different with a lot of talent sprinkled on the bench too, with the likes of Konate, Harvey Elliott, Ben Doak, McAllister and Nunez. And even though we lost the Community Shield to City 5-1, we still started the season well and are unfortunate not to beat City at the Etihad in the Premier League because of Doku's 94th minute equaliser. Penalties came between us and getting any further in the League Cup against Newcastle. However, we still sit top of the Premier League, only losing 2 games to both North London sides at the halfway point. And for the record, we are still really good at Old Trafford, beating United 1-0 thanks to Osimhen. The biggest shock of the season wasn't the fact that we beat PSG 4-0 in the round of 16 at Anfield though. It was that they came back in the second leg to stuff us 6-0 and prevent us from winning the treble once again. At that point as well, the treble would have been set for us to complete as we were smashing the Premier League and nailed on favourites in the FA Cup with none of the big clubs left in the competition. We completely embarrassed Newcastle in the semi-final of the FA Cup too as we beat them comfortably 4-0. In the final against Burnley, our Argentine wonder kid tore their defence apart. Although he didn't score either of the first 2 goals, he caused so many problems for them that led to goals, and Konate finished them off 3-0 with a big header. And that's another FA Cup final win. We secured the Premier League comfortably too, but I wasn't happy because once again the treble slipped right through our fingers. It's actually been a tough season for the squad physically. We've picked up a lot of injuries as well, and goals wise they've kind of dried up. We didn't get as many goals as what we did last season, with Osimhen only getting 19 goals himself, but still the performances have been really good. Defensively we've been a lot better. Domestic double we shouldn't be unhappy with, but I cannot believe we didn't get the treble with 4-0 up against PSG. So unfortunately, we have to go again next year. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do squad-wise, but we've got about £50 million to make some changes. The first bit of business I did this summer was 2 transfers in from the same club, with one being a 19-year-old winger who can also play up front, and an eventual replacement for Darwin Nunez. The other was Sudakov, just a really good attack-minded midfielder that I couldn't pass up on because of how cheap he was. Other than that, there was no big changes that I needed to be made, and our 11 continues to look strong without us having to sell anybody in the summer. The new guys add depth to our squad, which we definitely needed if we want to win the treble. It was, however, a ropey start to the season as we lost 2 matches in the opening 4 Premier League fixtures. Thankfully though, we faced Manchester United next, who we needed to smash to gain our confidence back, and that's what we did, winning 3-0. And it was just what we needed because we then went unbeaten till the end of November, nearly 3 months without losing a single game. We hit a bit of a rough patch at the beginning of December, but recovered it well, and we currently sit top of the league only by goal difference. However, Newcastle could overtake us in this weird 4-horse title race. Manchester City did knock us out of the League Cup, but that's not the important one, thankfully. Although drawing Newcastle in the FA Cup 3rd round is not ideal, which was won in extra time in the replay by a screamer from Mastan Tuono in off the post. It was another late goal in the 5th round too, but it means the treble dreams continues this season with us just ahead of Arsenal in the league and Eintracht Frankfurt in the Champions League, who we defeated 3-2 on aggregate thanks to another late goal, this time round by Darwin Nunez. But it's PSG next in the quarterfinals, but hey, March is a weird month as we beat Arsenal, knock out Norwich in the FA Cup, then lose to them in the league, but this title race is still going strong with 3 clubs all within a shot. Our trip to Paris didn't end well though, with the first leg as we lost 1-0. Thankfully at Anfield it was a different story. The defence was solid, keeping a clean sheet, and we were lethal up front with Nunez scoring 2 goals in the first half and Sturynski getting a late third to secure the win. And if you think that's a good result, wait till you see what we did in the FA Cup semi-final, as we completely destroyed Manchester City 5-0. This was the closest we have come to a treble now, 3 points clear in the Premier League, AC Milan the semi-finals of the Champions League, and Chelsea in the FA Cup final. We then went to the San Siro and swept up, scoring 3 goals, and secured our position in the final with a 5-1 aggregate win. And it's Manchester City, who we recently beat 5-0 in the semi-final of the FA Cup, who we've got to face in the final. But it's the same Manchester City who just beat us in the league 2-1. Thankfully, we are still picking up important points elsewhere. And for the 3rd season in a row, we lifted the Premier League title. That's 1 trophy down, 2 to go. Next is the FA Cup. And after finding ourselves 2-0 down, we scored 2 late goals to take the game to extra time with Osimhen's 90th minute equaliser. But the game went to penalties and up stepped Conor Gallagher to try and keep Chelsea's hopes alive, but Alisson saves and we are 2 trophies down and another FA Cup won as we lift the domestic double again. But it's time for the big one, the UEFA Champions League final against Manchester City. And with the scores 0-0 by halftime, we started the second half hot and opened the scoring thanks to Victor Osimhen. And we then had to hold on against a barrage of attacks, but in the 97th minute we secured the win thanks to Ben Dokes getting out our 2nd goal. And our legacy is cemented as we complete the treble challenge at Liverpool after Jurgen Klopp's era. And as always, the saved game file will be available for Patreon members and channel members. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you're subscribed for more. And why not check out what happened when I opened a mystery shirt box which transformed the rebuild into a build a nation save. That's on screen right now.